Hey everyone, welcome to today's Explainer. Okay, picture this. You're sitting at your desk staring at this absolute mountain of study material. It's totally overwhelming, right? You're probably thinking, how on earth am I going to get all this information into my brain and, actually keep it there? Well, you are in exactly the right place. Today, we're diving into an absolute masterclass. We'll be analyzing a comprehensive, step-by-step framework designed specifically to tackle the massive volume of info you need to conquer competitive exams.
I mean, we've all been there, haven't we? You spend hours reading, highlighting literally everything in sight, only to wake up the next morning and realize you can barely remember a single thing. It is incredibly frustrating. But good news. Today we are unpacking a proven methodology. It was developed by a JNU scholar with over 15 years of academic success. I'm talking clearing brutal exams like NET, JRF, UPSC prelims, and NDA. So this isn't just fluffy theory. These are battle-tested strategies for ultimate retention.
So here's our game plan for today. We're going to cover four main things. 1, goal and the right book. 2, the 4 stages of reading. 3, the complete study diet. And finally, number 4, emotional connection with books. All right, let's jump right into section 1, goal and the right book. Because the very first and honestly most crucial step happens before you even crack open a cover. You really have to shift your reading strategy based on your end goal. Think about it like cricket. Reading a novel just for fun, that's like a T20 match. It's fast, it's fun, you're just enjoying the vibe. But reading for a competitive exam? Oh no, that is a one-day international match. It requires a totally different mindset. You need structure, immense stamina, and a highly strategic approach to actually retain the research. You can't just take a T20 mindset into an ODI game, right? And you definitely can't use casual reading habits for hardcore exam prep. And look, when it comes to picking your materials, I know it is super tempting to just hoard random scattered PDFs floating around on Telegram. They're cheap, they're accessible, but your goal isn't to be a digital hoarder. Your goal is to crack the exam. You really have to invest in standard, high-quality books. Why? Because those standard books don't just throw isolated facts at you. They actually build the essential mental framework your brain desperately needs to organize and store complex ideas. Okay, moving on to section 2, the 4 stages of reading. See, tackling a massive textbook is really a multi-stage process. The source material actually compares it to falling in love. You don't just rush the whole thing on day 1. You build the relationship up, step by step. So here is the core methodology you've got to follow for every single textbook. You don't just read cover to cover and expect to magically memorize it all. It's a 4-part journey. First, the screening phase. Second, the deep dive. Third, active morning revision. And fourth, the strategic use of mock tests. Let's break these down a bit.
What's really fascinating here is how your speed completely changes between the first 2 stages. For your first reading, you're going at a moderate pace, maybe 15 to 20 pages an hour. You're not trying to memorize every date and name here. You are just screening, skimming headings, reading intros, finding the main pillars. Now, by the time you hit your second reading, your speed should actually double to about 30 pages an hour. Sounds crazy, right? But it works because your brain has already mapped out the territory, so you can seamlessly dive deep into the facts without getting lost.
To really make this stick, I love this geographical metaphor from the source material. Imagine you're taking a trip to Delhi. Your first reading is just knowing you are going to Delhi. You know the general direction, you know you're getting on a train. That's it. It's only during your second reading, once you've actually arrived at the station, that you figure out exactly which streets to take, which lane to turn down, and the specific address. Honestly, don't try to navigate the tiny alleyways before you've even boarded the train. And that brings us to the real intellectual climax of this whole process, mock tests. Now, most of us just use mock tests to check our scores and, well, usually feel pretty bad about ourselves. But this explainer highlights a totally different approach. Think of a mock test as a fork poking your brain. Once you take a test and struggle to remember, say, if the Dutch or the French East India Company came first, your brain literally rewires itself. The next time you open that history book, you're not just passively reading. You are actively hunting for those specific connections. You literally become a different, much sharper reader. Right. On to section 3, the complete study diet. Now that the reading stages are down to a science, let's look at how to structure your day so you don't end up with massive brain fog. Think about your absolute favorite meal. Now imagine eating exactly that same thing, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, 7 days a week. You'd be miserable, right? The source material uses this great analogy of a balanced Indian meal, like roti and dal. Just like your body needs a varied, colorful plate to feel energized, your brain desperately craves variety.
Forcing yourself to read only one subject, like economics, from morning to night is just a terrible cognitive strategy. Your brain loves color, it loves variety, and it needs a bit of novelty.
So what does a highly successful study day look like? It mixes different subjects and completely different reading stages. In the morning, maybe you tackle 40 pages of history doing a fresh first reading. Then, by midday, when your brain needs a shift, you switch to 30 pages of geography doing a second reading. And in the afternoon, you pivot again to 20 pages of polity for revision. Every time you switch, your brain essentially hits the refresh button, which completely eliminates that brutal mid-afternoon burnout.
Finally, let's look at Section 4, Emotional Connection with Books. We've talked about all the mechanics and schedules, but now it's time for probably the most profound secret to long-term memory, the emotional side of learning.
Look, if you treat your textbook like this heavy, boring burden, your brain is absolutely going to resist remembering it. But if you anchor those dry facts to a personal, emotional interest, memory becomes almost effortless. For instance, trying to brute force memorize the dates of 1920s Indian history? Exhausting. But as the scholar points out, if you first build a deep, personal admiration for the historical figures of that era, like Bhagat Singh, well, suddenly you aren't memorizing boring dates anymore. You're reading the life story of someone you actually respect. The dates and events just naturally stick because you genuinely care about the story. Emotion is literally the superglue for memory.
Which brings us to this beautiful, overarching insight from the text. The best way is to make friends with books. They don't change with time, their messages remain the same. You have to treat your standard reference books like lifelong friends. Approach them with a bit of curiosity. Expect an engaging conversation instead of dreading it. When you build that positive anticipation, that feeling of, wow, I'm going to learn something really cool today, your retention just skyrockets. So, to wrap this all up, define your goal, strictly follow those 4 reading stages, feed your brain a varied, multi-subject diet, and make friends with your books. If emotion really is the superglue for memory, ask yourself, what else are you forgetting simply because you haven't given your brain a reason to care? Rethink your relationship with your study materials, drop your own personal reading techniques down in the comments below, and I will see you in the next explainer.